Visitor for Gordon. Written and told by Kiefer Adams. Lots of visitors travelled from the other railway, or as the engines would call London, the big city. Engines that pulled their trains would stay the night before going home the next morning. A new visitor had come to the island all the way from the big city. He would taunt the engines for working on an out-of-date railway and claiming that no visitors with famous backgrounds would ever visit the Fat Controller's railway at all. The day after the visitor had arrived, he found Gordon resting in the coal yards. "I don't understand what this railway is coming to," he said snootily. "Can't you just go home already?" grunted Gordon. "We've had enough of your lip for one day." "That's exactly where I was going," said the big city engine pompously. "But take my word for it, I very well might be the last popular visitor you'll ever have on Sodor." Gordon seethed with rage. The big city engine just laughed and puffed away, clouds of steam trailing behind him as he left. "I hope we never see the back of him again," Gordon huffed, as he puffed away to collect the express. Gordon returned to the sheds that evening, still feeling cross. "Stupid thing," he snorted to no one in particular. "I've no patience with that." "Oh, especially after the argument of what station's which at the big city last night," chuckled James. "That is beside the point," said Gordon. "Well, we've had worse visitors," admitted Thomas. "Duck's friend's city of Truro was okay," said Percy. "Not for Gordon," said James. "Will you be quiet?" snapped Gordon. But then his tune changed as he heaved a heavy sigh. "I hate to say it, but there will be no visitor to top that friend of Duck's either." Hissing mournfully, Gordon rolled into the shed and tried his best to go to sleep. "He wouldn't be saying that if he found out who we had," whispered James. "Who?" inquired Thomas and Percy. "Listen," whispered James, and he explained everything, but kept his voice down in case Gordon stirred. James informed Thomas and Percy that a visitor with 2 tenders had recently come to the island. Of course, Gordon had wanted to feel more important than the visitor, but only if he knew what was behind the 2 tenders in the first place. The next morning, the Fat Controller arrived at his office at the big station, ready to start another day's work. He had just hung up his hat when the station master came in. "Excuse me, sir," he said. "I think you should know about our latest visitor." "The one with 2 tenders?" asked the Fat Controller. "Yes, sir," said the station master, and he quickly explained. "Good heavens!" gasped the Fat Controller. "Are you sure? Does Gordon know?" "I don't think so, sir," replied the station master. "What are your orders?" "Gordon's pulling the express," the Fat Controller said. "Contact the station master at Tidmouth and have him stopped. I think it's time he met this visitor in person." "Certainly, sir," replied the station master, and he hurriedly left the office. The Fat Controller mopped his brow. "Well, bless my soul," he said. Gordon was not quite pleased when the Tidmouth station master did stop him. "The Fat Controller wants you back at the shed at once," he said. "Uncouple from your train and wait in the siding, please." "How unfortunate," grunted Gordon. He was still put out by the big city engine. He had just reversed into the siding when Donald came along. "Ah, you're still here," he smiled. "That's a mercy." "What are you doing here?" demanded Gordon. "I've come to take on your train," replied Donald. "Let me guess, Fat Controller's orders," sniffed Gordon. "Aye, you could say that," said Donald. "But I'm sure you've been told that he's waiting for you at the sheds." "All right, I'm going," grunted Gordon. "Just take my train and be done with it." Donald couldn't resist chuckling. He was coupled to the express and he set off. Gordon groaned under his breath as he made his way back to the shed, wondering all the while why the Fat Controller would want to see him. Henry, Douglas and Duck were in attendance when Gordon arrived at the shed. The Fat Controller had just arrived himself. "What's going on here?" demanded Gordon. "Shh, shh," whispered Duck. "You're about to find out." "Brace yourself," chortled Henry. "Aye, you're in for a treat," rapped Douglas. "Ah, Gordon, I'm glad that you got my message," said the Fat Controller. "I hear you quite admired our two-tendered visitor." "Yes, sir, what about it?" "You mean, what about him?" said the Fat Controller. "Gordon, this may come as a surprise to you, but this visitor is none other than your own brother, Flying Scotsman." Gordon's mouth dropped. "Impossible," he said. "When I last saw him at Doncaster—" "Yes, of course," interrupted the Fat Controller. "I'm sure he can explain to you in person. He's waiting for you at the big station yard." "Go on," encouraged Henry. "Go for it." Gordon was beside himself. "Oh, well, of course, I'll go straight away," he cried, and he hurried away within moments. Gordon hurried to the yard of the big station, and sure enough, there was Flying Scotsman. It was his two tenders that Gordon saw first, before seeing their engine, with a shape very much like his own. "Hello, Gordon!" Flying Scotsman beamed. "I'm so glad to finally see you at last. I heard how impressed you were with my tenders." "Yes, indeed," exclaimed Gordon. "But why? When I last saw you at Doncaster, you had a single tender and numbered 1472. "I'm sure your controllers told you that times have changed on the other railway," replied Flying Scotsman. "But all the same, I'm glad to finally see you. It's been a long time." "Yes, indeed," smiled Gordon. The Fat Controller had arranged for the two engines to be photographed side by side. Many engines who saw them together thought they were enterprising engines indeed. They were sorry when it was time for Flying Scotsman to return home. He gave Gordon his best wishes, thanked the Fat Controller for allowing him to visit, and set off for home. A chorus of cheers and whistles, the ringing of Toby's bell, and the high chorus of Auld Lang Syne from Donald and Douglas echoed through the station as Flying Scotsman left. Gordon was no longer thinking about that big city engine anymore. He was proud to know that his own brother was one of the greatest visitors that the island of Sodor had ever received. And that was good enough for him.